Everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us here for our panel here on fueling future growth, second location growth opportunities for breweries. My name is Josh Lance. I'm the managing director of Lance CPA Group, which is a virtual remote CPA practice that works with craft breweries across the country, providing accounting, tax, consultant, and HR services to those breweries. With me today, I have Mike Condon from Noon Whistle and Chris Burns from Old Ox Brewery. Welcome, gentlemen, to the panel here. And maybe just to start off, I'll start with you, Mike. You can maybe explain a little bit about Noon Whistle, a little bit about its history and where you're located at.
Sure, yeah. Mike here at Noon Whistle. I'm one of the owners with two of my other buddies. We started the brewery back in 2014, right at the very end of that year. So 2015 was pretty much our full production year. We're based just right outside of Chicago. We're in the suburbs, two locations. So that's, I think, how I got put on this panel. And I'll get into it, but production facility at one location, and then more of a tasting room kind of entertainment facility now is the second location. So that's a quick 2 seconds of who I am. Noon Whistle is.
Awesome, thanks. Chris, how about you?
Well, hey everyone, it's Chris from Old Ox Brewery. I'm the president here. Old Ox Brewery's first location is our production facility as well. We opened up just like Mike in late 2014, and then opened a second location in Middleburg, Virginia in late 2019. We're a distribution brewery, family run. So it's myself and my wife and my parents are the ownership team, and we're having fun.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So let's start to dive into this, right? So both of you guys both have breweries that have second locations. And I know a lot of breweries think about that concept of, okay, what does a second location mean? What do we do there? But first, before we get into, you opening up those second locations, let's talk a little about how your first location went and how you started to kind of grow your brewery at the first location and how that kind of worked for you at the beginning. So again, I'll start with Mike here for that answer.
Yeah. So as I said, we opened the very end of 2014 and we started really producing and folks really started coming in 2015. I mean, our opening was 2 days before Christmas. So in 2014. So with that, a small tasting room, our original facility was 5,000 square feet. We were doing all the brewing and production at that facility as well. Really started organic growth, word of mouth. We knew when we started that we were going to get into distribution pretty early on. It kind of was changing throughout its development of how we distribute it, but we did start getting product out in the market later, mid 2015, and then slowly built that as well. So it was a combination for us. The idea of getting product in the market from a distribution aspect, we were trying to really increase our brand awareness a bit quicker than just folks coming into the tasting room and discovering who we were. And that, I think is really just the get-go from the growth standpoint for us. Early success started happening when we started playing around with some styles. As everybody has, hazy IPAs are now a big thing. But in 2017, when we first brewed a hazy IPA in the Chicagoland area, there wasn't a ton being done. We were one of, I would say, the first few. So we immediately started gaining some attention with that, and then from there. As folks started coming in, the discovery that our other liquid was pretty good as well. So, that's immediately how we started gaining, growth and got the business off and running is, just, I think like all of us, get people in, drink the liquid and then start talking about it.
Awesome. How about you, Chris?
Well, like Mike, we started with a distribution focus. When we opened in June of 2014, and right at that time, the laws in Virginia were changing. So when we were writing our business plan, when we did our 2 years of business planning from 2012 to 2014, tasting rooms weren't a thing in Virginia. You weren't allowed to have a tasting room that just sold beer without being a restaurant. So distribution was always our focus from day one. We started in 2014 with core products ranging from a session IPA to a golden ale to a full strength IPA and a porter. Draft only at first. We wanted to really capture the kind of on-premise market in our Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. And then about a year into it, we added off-premise, specifically 12-ounce cans to our lineup. The thinking there was that we would be able to get the beer into people's mouths in the bars and restaurants in the area, get them to trust it, and then have it available for them in the grocery stores once they'd gotten to know us a little bit. And that worked out really well. But very quickly, at the same time, we also realized that when the laws changed in early 2014, beer tourism became a really important part of beer culture in Northern Virginia, as it did in, well, basically the rest of the United States. So whereas in Loudoun County, where we are, we were maybe the fourth modern brewery in Loudoun County. As those tasting room laws started to change, we very quickly started seeing growth in the number of breweries, specifically tasting room only breweries in our area. And we're at the point now where we have 40 breweries just in our county. So it's tasting room has seen an enormous growth and has absolutely become an important part of our business, even though we do still consider ourselves very distribution focused.
Awesome. With both of kind of the growth in your first facilities and how you got those going, was there a point where you kind of saw a plateauing of that growth and saw things slowing down and kind of figuring, okay, well, what do we do next? And I'll take you, Chris, you can answer this first, of what you saw in Old Ox and what you kind of decided to pivot towards from there.
Yeah, we absolutely saw growth starting to slow. It still hasn't plateaued. We've still seen year over year growth in most segments of our business, but overall we're seeing year over year growth. It has absolutely slowed as we've seen more entrants to the market. The easy growth is gone, and now you're putting more and more effort into every percentage point of growth for sure. And that's certainly one of the reasons we thought that adding a second tasting room facility was important to our continued growth. We didn't feel like it was the right time to expand our distribution footprint. We had done a really good job of creating, a fairly deep penetration into our home market, so within 10 miles of the brewery. And we had added some close-in territory in Washington, D.C., and recently we've expanded a little bit into Maryland as well. But it's all still within about 30 miles of the brewery. And, the farther and farther away we got from our brewery, the harder and harder it was to penetrate the market. We were investing in boots on the ground. We were investing in the promotional materials and marketing materials and spends that we needed to with our retail accounts, but the investment wasn't, you didn't get the return on that investment as we thought we could with a tasting room where we could control our own destiny.
Gotcha. And Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, you say plateau. It wasn't necessarily, the plateau is kind of just facility created for us. So we did see it. It's just, as I stated, we started out with our 5,000 square foot facility, 15 barrel brew house, and we were adding tanks like as we could as popularity and demand started, calling for it. But in 2018, I think it was 2018. The Brewers Association recognized us as one of the fastest growing brewers in the country, and that was basically, we were very, very tiny, and we were just very tiny still. At that point, our facility was maxed out. So with the distribution network that we did build, at that time, we had about 5 distributors. And then with what we were selling through our tasting room, we couldn't make enough liquid, which is a great problem to have. So that's ultimately where the decision started coming into play for a second facility, and what that would look like. But growth was slowed because there was only so much liquid that could be made, and that created a much more interesting questions as we started looking further as how we were going to expand, because the existing network of distributors that we had, although they were selling the liquid that we could give them, how much more could we give them immediately, and could they sell, and there was a little bit of guessing and a little bit of looking at some numbers and questioning as well. But yeah, I mean, that was the thing for us was, fortunately we were in need of more liquid, so that's where we hit a wall, and I had to make a decision if we were going to be happy with what we were doing, or if it was time to expand and create something bigger.
Awesome. For all those watching here live online, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll pick those up as we go along here. So, and then looking at what that second location ultimately looks like, a lot of breweries go a lot of different routes with their second locations, right? Some may go they need just more production space, and so they go more that route. Some need a bigger taproom space. Their current taproom is really tiny, and they want more taproom space. Some want that taproom in a more retail location, whereas a lot of breweries, especially one started in 2015, 2016 area. A lot of them started industrial parks and things like that, and so want something more retail versus industrial. As you start thinking about your kind of going to that second stage opportunity, what was kind of your main goals and what you're trying to check off to try to get there and try to accomplish with those? So Chris, I'll start with you again.
So we had two main goals when we were looking at our second facility. So our first facility being more of a production focused brewery, it is in an industrial park. It's not the prettiest place in the world. It's absolutely function over form. And as our tasting room was growing in our first location, our Ashburn location, we were seeing that our facility wasn't really set up to be optimized for the tasting room experience in two ways. One, as I mentioned, it was pretty utilitarian, and there's not a whole lot that we're going to be able to do about that. But secondly, we had a 30-barrel brew house. We have a 30-barrel brew house, and when people were coming into our tasting room, they were asking, "Hey, what's new on tap?" And we're saying, "Well, we've got these great core beers that we've been producing for the last 3.5, 4 years at this point." But we didn't have the flexibility to do the more experimental, cutting edge products that we wanted to, because it would sit around for way too long if I was doing 30 or 60 barrels. So our two main goals when we were looking at our second facility were to create a very customer centric and customer focused tasting room in a really nice atmosphere for people to enjoy their beer. And then secondly, we wanted to add an experimental brew house to our repertoire, so we could do 5 barrels at a time. We could do 10 barrels at a time if demand called for it, simply so we could explore the depths of our creativity and give customers the experience that they were looking for. So those were our two primary goals.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, so we were a little bit flipped, right? So they had a bigger space. It sounds like from a production standpoint, starting out, we had a bit smaller space. So for us, the number one goal was that's why we ultimately decided to look for that second location, was production, and to be able to increase our production, increase our brew house size, kind of everything that goes with it. The facility that we were in had its own limitations, not only from a size standpoint, but little things, like the back receiving, let's call it garage door. I think it was about 9 feet tall. So if you wanted to get a full stack of cans, print it 11 feet, it doesn't fit through the door. So then you got to get those broken down, if you can get them broken down, and what's the extra charge for that. So there was a lot of things just from a production standpoint that was a number one focus, but kind of that was 1A, and 1B was still going to be, we absolutely wanted to have a taste room at the new location, and put an emphasis in that as well. I mean, when we started from early on when we first got going, the expectations we had for our tasting room wasn't great, I guess. And it turned out to be something really significant, and something that ultimately, to this day, helps us survive. And it's a big profit revenue producer. So that was 1B. So it was, how do we increase our production? What's the right facility for that? And then where is it going to be situated where we can still draw tasting room traffic?
And kind of going off that comment, Mike, of find that right facility. What was kind of your process in kind of determining, okay, where's that second location going to be at? What are we looking for facility size wise? Is it going to be more retail, more industrial? How do you then think about the financing of doing that second facility? And ultimately then the lead time of the point of saying, hey, we're going to do this, to it actually open its doors and cranking out beer.
Yeah. So that, we kind of went 13 different directions with, the size and maybe what that facility looked like. We knew we wanted something bigger, but what was it? We kind of, eventually we had to work backwards, right? So we started saying, what's our, start first and foremost, what's the next 5 years for us? And really from a production standpoint, where do we want to be? And then we started, talking to existing distributors, and then what, from a market growth standpoint, where do we want to go, and what were the expectations? And, it was, real conversations, realistically, what do we think we could sell in the market? And then ultimately what, the tasting room demand would be. From there, essentially build a business plan again and build it out to, realize what kind of revenue that would generate year 1 through year 5, depending on if we hit our barrelage goals that we did put in place. And then what is that going to cost? What's the size of the brew house that we think we need to accommodate for growth, future growth, and then also to accommodate the initial needs right from the get-go. And then for us, too, there's the other factor was, the last couple of years prior to our expansion, we were, doing fairly well. We were profitable. So we were putting some money into the bank, and it was, do we use a good chunk of that and deplete that, working capital that we have, or do we look to finance a bit more? Will the banks give us that even to finance the bit more that we wanted to do? So we started vetting banks after we built that plan. And it's depending on the amount of money that you're looking for. If you're someone that's going to be looking to try to get some funding through banks, the detail that you'll have to put into it is pretty significant. Especially the first couple of years. I mean, you think not only a monthly breakdown, but I had to get into a weekly breakdown from production and a revenue standpoint for them to really buy into the plan that we put into place. So. All that started came into play. Ultimately, we decided on a facility that was much larger, 30,000 square foot footprint. For us, we did get a 30 barrel brew house, 3 vessel, pretty capital heavy investment. That we put into the new facility. So we definitely are friends with our bankers now.
And how much time from that point we decided, okay, we're gonna go open that second facility to it actually open? What was that that time frame?
Yeah, so real quick, 2018 again, like I said, that's when we started really hitting that wall of production. In 2019 we put it's 2018 at the very end of it, we started saying, okay, we want to grow. 2019 we really put that plan into place. We knew what it was that we wanted. And then that was early 2019. By the end of 2019, we had everything set. We went to our architects and we got our architectural drawings. I will tell you, make sure you go to somebody that understands a brew house, contractor to build it, same thing. And we kicked off construction late 2019. We thought, talking about it in 2018, we'd be starting construction early 2019. There was easily 6+ months before our actual start time to what our first expectations were. And then, we can talk about fast forward. We were in the middle of construction during 2020 and COVID. So everything else got delayed a bit further.
Yeah. Awesome. Chris, how about you and Old Ox with your second location in Middlesburg? You went with a different approach, looking for the more retail space and be able to do experimental beers. What did you start to do, kind of assess what kind of space you wanted, the location you wanted that in, and kind of same, things that, Mike had talked about finance and things like that.
Yeah, the first thing we did is, as an ownership team, we started talking about what was important to us. And one of the things that was very important to us was to open a second brewery in Loudoun County. So the same county that we're in, our primary facility, our Ashburn facility is in. And the reason we wanted to do that is because we have a lot of really great community relationships. We understand the local economy, we understand local government, and that's where most of our business and personal relationships are. We live here, we work here, we play here. So we started looking at a map of Loudoun County and realized that there was a ton of different breweries all over the county, except for this one little corner up near Middleburg. And Middleburg is a cool little town that we've been visiting for years. It's a very visitor-centric town, so lots of cool events on weekends. It's kind of in the historic horse country in Virginia. And we kind of got it in our mind that might be a nice place to start, because it's so pretty, because it's got it's far enough away that I'm not robbing from the same customer base that I already have established in Ashburn, but it's close enough where it's not a pain in the ass for me to get to, from my house, any day of the week, right? So we started visiting the town and we fell in love, and we started talking to everybody in the town, including town government, started looking around. And when we started looking around in Middleburg, what we were looking for was a pretty small footprint area, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. We weren't looking for much. And what we stumbled upon was a building that was for sale. And actually the town itself was the one selling the building. And it was this 8,000 square foot, 3-story building that had existing tenants in it. And it was a lot more than we expected to chew off. But when we went to go look at it, the bottom floor was empty and really well situated to be a tasting room environment with a great front yard that could become a beer garden patio, and a 4-bay garage in the back that could become a brew house. And then we could still have the existing tenants in there, adding value to the property. So we kicked it around for a little bit. We had to go back and rethink our entire strategy because it was different than what we had expected to be in when we started the search. But it ended up working out. And so in addition to adding a second brewery, we became landlords for the first time, which has been an amazing experience. Certainly some unexpected challenges that brings with it as well. But I guess I wouldn't have it any other way. We've really enjoyed being a part of the town. We've enjoyed having the tenants that we have. Just side note, the building used to be the town's, like, not hospital, but basically health center. Okay. And so I've had, 8 or 9 people come into the brewery across the bar, order a beer, and say, I was born in this building. I thought that's pretty cool. So now we have, it's a really interesting mixed use building. That we have a Pilates studio, we have a doctor's office, we have a government contractor, and we have a residential tenant. I mean, it's crazy. But it's a fun, quirky place, and we were able to turn it into that comfortable customer experience that we wanted to from the beginning. We did create that great beer garden out front, and we're really excited to be a part of the town.
And how long did that take for you guys from the kind of conception of we want to do that second location to actually getting the doors open?
We closed on the property because the town owned it. It was about an 8-month long public process to actually purchased the building. But from the time that we closed on the building to the time that we actually opened the doors, we closed in December, like late November, early December of 2018, and opened our doors June of 2019. So I'd say about 7 months.
And then as far as financing that, because that in your case is a little bit of a different story because you actually bought the real estate that your brewery is going to be in. How did the financing work for that standpoint for handling that?
It made it a little bit easier, honestly, to work with our community bank, which I am a huge advocate for community banks. I think they have more vision and are more understanding of small business than some of the bigger banks, which we could talk about for an hour. But but we basically financed the property and then financed equipment with the same loan, and it ended up that we purchased the property well under the appraised value, so we were still able to do debt financing on the after repair value of the property, and finance at like 80% of that, and it ended up being a combination of our own equity plus debt financing from the bank, and it worked out really well.
And then I'll throw this to both of you guys as well. How far is the distance between those two locations? That's a question that we get a lot is, okay, if we're doing a second location, how far do we have it from the existing location? So Chris, I'll go to you first and then to Mike. How far is, your Ashburn location from your Middleburg location?
It's about 35 minutes, and so it's about 25 miles. Like we get one dirt road in between us, so that slows it down a little bit. But yeah, it's about 35 minutes roughly. Okay.
And then Mike, how about you from the Lombard to Naperville locations?
Pretty similar. I would say maybe just under a half hour, between 25, 30 minutes on average. The mileage is a bit less, just the way it goes around the suburbs here. But yeah, for us, there was an interesting decision. When we knew we were going to do the second location, we ultimately said, do we want to consider the city since we're so close to a larger city? Obviously there's definitely some value there. Ultimately, us as owners decided not to do that just because of where we were living and our lifestyles, and having to go into the city and manage a business was something that we just decided not to do. So when we were looking, although there was opportunity at numerous locations, it was a bit thinner than you would imagine for the right need of the space that we were looking for. So when we did come across our building, that was, just started approaching that 30+ minute mark. We thought that was at least a good enough distance away. It was just finally getting far enough because there was a couple that we ran into that were a bit closer, and we might have started cannibalizing the business that we already created, especially from a tasting room standpoint.
Mike, when it comes to operating that second location, now that you have it up and running, what challenges have come into play in operating that, especially maybe some challenges you didn't think of at first when you were thinking about opening that second location?
I was talking to my other partner, Paul, his name is today, and I just kind of threw that question out at him as well. And one thing that he echoed right off the bat was just you can't be everywhere at one time. And before, when you had the singular location, especially, and it was a smaller business too, you were involved in everything always. And although we still feel like we are, it's not necessarily possible, especially physically, two locations. So that was the first challenge. Being distant a bit more, hiring on new employees, having to have the faith in the managers you might have in your taste rooms to be really portraying that vision, that that feel that you want that place to have. Communication is things that you're going to always hear in business is probably one of the things that, although not a challenge, but something you definitely have to work on every day to make sure that what's happening here is either echoing what's happening at the other place, or do we want it to echo, and how is that being communicated? But beyond those basics, for us, some of the challenges have been just with increased, larger facility, production facility, bringing on more staff, from in a brewing perspective, making sure that we have the right people in place. We went from our 15 barrel brew house to a 30 barrel brew house, making sure, that crossover from, our core beers that we've had in the market for a long period of time, were exactly still what our core beers once were and still are. As we grew and quality, QC was a real big piece of our expansion and what we wanted to put into it. So making sure that as we're growing and putting all these new nice toys and tools in place and people to help us make sure the quality of our product is better, understanding it and properly managing it. I mean, it's easy to say that you get it, but until you're doing it, sometimes, you scratch your head for the first, 3 minutes while you're looking at it, and then, you figure it out, move forward. So just growing pains really in general, and just being able to accept the fact that there is going to be problems and challenges. And by the way, stuff's going to break all the time. So if you could find somebody that can fix it, that'd be a really good thing to have on staff.
Chris, how about you? What challenges have you guys faced as you've managed both locations and deal with that new second location?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mike nailed number one, making sure that we had the right hires in place to make the second location successful was absolutely critical. And beyond just having bodies in place, making sure that you have people that can be effective managers, because like Mike said, whereas we were very hands-on as an ownership team when we had one facility, it necessitates that you take a little step back and allow people to really take the reins. And that has been challenging more for me, because apparently I'm a terrible people manager by naturally. So I've had to learn how to be a much better people manager than maybe I was comfortable being before we opened the second facility. But as kind of a spin-off to that, just kind of integrating company culture and making sure that people feel included. Nobody feels isolated because they're at one facility versus the other. Everyone knows what's going on is incredibly important, and it's probably been the biggest challenge. We were operating the tasting rooms in such a way for a little while where, in Ashburn, we had Mondays off. When we just had one facility, when we were doing like company events, we would generally have them on Mondays because the tasting room was off, so the tasting room could participate in the holiday party and the management meetings and things like that. And when we opened Middleburg, we realized that Mondays were actually a decent day in Middleburg because it's such a visitor-centric town that when they had long weekends, people would take off a Monday. And so there were times where we couldn't get everybody together when we really, really wanted to. So I think cross-pollinating company culture and making sure you have the right people in place are absolutely the top challenges for us anyway.
We have one question come in, kind of relating to that with staff and how how you handle staff between both locations. Do you allow staff to work in one location, then go work at the other location? Is there that kind of cross-pollination there, or is it pretty kind of siloed from a staffing perspective? And tactically, when they do move to different locations, how you handle that, especially when it comes to, maybe there's different locations with payroll tax situations or things like that.
I mean, I could jump in. So staffing for us, front of the house, if you will, in our tasting rooms, we have a little bit of people that float back and forth, being that we are relatively close, that 30-minute mark, especially in the what's called metropolitan area, at least outside of it, is pretty close. So we do have that, and we brew at both locations still. The original 15 barrel brew house here, the new production 30 barrel, and the production. When I say here, I'm sitting in my Lombard facility. The production in Lombard is that much less that we do still sometimes a brewer to come over and, to brew for the day, fill a tank. So we are bouncing back and forth. We don't, I think from a, shoot, Josh, you'd be able to answer this question better than I probably could, but from a, staffing standpoint and being at two locations, I mean, we're both in the same county. And, both facilities are in the same county, same state. So there really isn't much of a challenge with that. It's just for our side of the business, just making sure that we're tracking where, the hours are going and where the employees are at, and, properly building out, so we can understand the finance for each facility. But that's just more on our side that we have to track it.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, same. We most folks that work at Old Ox are mostly at one facility, but we do have crossover both in front of house and production. We have one production team, so we have folks going back and forth between breweries, and we see that as a benefit, because you can play on a small system, and you can really dial yourself in on the large production system. Front of house, mostly folks are in one spot, but when we have scheduling issues, it's really nice to be able to have some folks be able to bounce back and forth. From the logistical standpoint, from the kind of back office standpoint, we don't have any real issues with that. We did integrate all of the same timekeeping systems, point of sale systems, everything at both locations. That was really important to us, to make sure we didn't have disparate systems, because that just would have made me crazy, and I'm crazy enough anyway. So, but yeah, if you work 36 hours in one location and 5 hours in the other location, you're still getting overtime from Old Ox Brewery. It's one entity from our perspective. So.
Yeah, I'll add to, but our systems at both facilities are mirroring each other as well. So that's another, key component of making that, if they are going to go back and forth, something that is pretty easy to do. I couldn't imagine if we had two different systems at each place,
right,
or a different system at each place.
What opportunities does your brewery have now that you have a second location in place? And Chris, I'll start with you first on that question.
Well, we have the ability now that I feel like we didn't have before, which was to be able to experiment, be able to try new things, without the risk involved with having to dump a 30 or a 60 barrel batch of beer. We also have the opportunity, and this has actually been one of the challenges as well, but we've had the opportunity to learn how to reach a different audience. In Ashburn, we have a set population that lives there or works there, but they're the same community all the time. So things like our email newsletter work really well in Ashburn, and Facebook and social media work really well in Ashburn, and it's just simply not the case for Middleburg, because it is a very transient, very visitor focused town. So we've had to find new ways to communicate with potential customers, because when you go, just think about how you travel. When you go to a new location, you're probably not looking at their email newsletter, because you probably don't subscribe to it, and you probably aren't looking at their social media accounts, at least not until after you've already discovered them. So things like Google have become more important to us. Making relationships with all of the bed and breakfasts and resorts and restaurants in the area has become really important. So it's opened our eyes to new ways of communicating with guests and potential guests, and we've been able to translate that back to Ashburn too now. So I think it's helped us become more effective communicators, both internally with staff and externally with customers.
Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's allowed us to be able to grow to what that potential is and can be. As I said very early on, we were making the liquid to a degree where our distributors with our tasting rooms, then we would sell through it, and it was like, how much more can we push? And if we did want to start expanding markets, what does that look like to us? So the new facility obviously gives us the ability to do that, and we're starting to see what that true potential is. It's a tough time to start seeing what the true potential is with getting through COVID and whatnot. But so that's the first thing, and then the different new facilities. I don't know if I mentioned before, but with our second location that we added, we actually expanded our original location too. So we took that from a 5,000 square foot facility to almost 15. We added a small banquet space to that and a kitchen. So that's the Lombard, that is this location, having a banquet space, that opens up an opportunity for us, a different revenue stream. Adding food, although it's a bit of a challenge through these times, can get more people inside. If you increase the space where you add 100 seats or 200, whatever it is, just because you added the space doesn't mean people are going to go put their butts in it. So you got to give them a reason to show up. So, it gives us the fun ability to start playing around stuff like that. Of different events, we had a comedy show come into our one facility because we could accommodate, the 300 plus guests that they demanded for a couple days. And then, what other things do we want to start playing with? Mixed use for our space. Is there distilling in our future? Who knows? Contract brewing. I have a facility that, I can brew probably more barrelage than I necessarily maybe want to. But that was by design. So it's really opened up just, we can start playing around with, from a business perspective, different ways to continue to stream in the revenue, not just straight have to go to your distributors and people need to show up into the tasting room.
I guess finally wrapping up here because we're getting short on time. What does growth look like for your brewery going forward? Both from further expansion or increasing production at current facilities or doing other things as a result. Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, just quickly, growth right now is, we just really are still fresh into the new facility, the new production space. So it's take a step back and really work this business, really maximize what the new facility can do. We've definitely lost, I don't want to say lost, but through COVID, it's a different, if you asked me that question and we didn't have a pandemic a year ago, that would maybe it's a different answer. But through the pandemic, folks, I think we realized that might have been going out 4 days a week are now only going out 2 days a week. And how do you make sure that out of those 2 days, they're showing up to your place at least one of those days, and really just focusing on that. So moving forward, it's how do we get the most out of our two facilities? I think both of us probably could say we're entrepreneurs at heart, though. We're always probably going to be looking at least us on our side of the fence at opportunities that might come about. But really the focus is, let's maximize the two pretty cool spaces that we have right now.
Chris, how about you?
I agree completely, especially after COVID, that we're not looking for growth through additional locations at this time. We're 100% looking to grow within the facilities that we have from a tasting room perspective. There is just a basic destabilization, due to COVID. It's funny, we actually had a really amazing COVID experience. It was very, very stressful, but we did relatively well during COVID because we were able to pivot, like a lot of breweries, and do things like curbside pickup and home delivery. And we actually produced hand sanitizer for the state of Virginia. So we did a really good job of continuing to grow during COVID. We actually were up 10% in 2020, which was awesome. We were really thankful to be up 10%. However, I will say that those revenue streams that we created during COVID have become irrelevant to our customer base at this point. People don't need hand sanitizer anymore. The supply chain fixed itself. People are pretty much done with curbside pickup and home delivery. They want to be out and experience life again. And to Mike's point, I think that maybe they're not going out as often. So we've had a little bit of a rough re-entry in 2021 that we didn't have in 2020. So for us, it's about kind of getting back to a new normal before we think about, about growth. But of course, I've got like 500 ideas for growth whenever that time hits. But other product lines, I'd like to branch out beyond beer too. I know Mike mentioned distilling, but I'd like to branch out a little bit beyond beer. We are still exploring things like private events, especially now that we're seeing such a demand for especially private parties, wedding, not so much the main event, but like rehearsal dinners, birthday parties, things like that. So we're really exploring how to be better suited for occasion-based partying.
Awesome. Well, we're at the end of time here. Thank you both, Mike and Chris, for joining us here today and sharing your expertise and insights. If anyone wants to get a hold of you after this, is there a good way they can reach you?
Feel free to reach out. You can email me at Chris, CHRIS, at oldoxbrewery, not brewing.com, oldoxbrewery.com.
Similar, my email would be Mike, M-I-K-E, at Noon Whistle Brewing, not brewery, brewing.com. So noonwhistlebrewing.com. And I think my information's up on the website too. So yeah, anybody can feel free to email me, reach out. I'm always willing to chat.
Thank you both. If anyone wants to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at josh@landcpa.com. Again, thanks everyone for joining us here today, and we'll see you again next time.
Cheers, guys.